I'd like to offer a brief rebuttal to the talking points in your video. To begin with, let's take a look at the RATE group. This group, associated with the Institute for Creation Research, is composed of well-known creationists like John Baumgartner and Russell Humphreys. These men, despite possessing doctorates, don't seem to have much work to their name. For instance, Russell Humphreys, a doctorate in physics, hasn't published a single scientific work in a secular journal since 2003. And, with the exception of 2 papers, none of his work even deals with radiometric dating. A doctorate doesn't make you an expert at everything automatically. Even having a physics doctorate doesn't mean you have a thorough working knowledge of every aspect of physics. Quite the opposite. Physics is a big subject, and graduate students trying to get their doctorates usually focus their attention on some very specific subtopic of physics. Humphreys got his doctorate by focusing on cosmic rays and ultra-high-energy nucleon-nucleon interactions, according to his biography on creation.com. Absolutely nothing to do with carbon-14 below the surface of the Earth. John Baumgartner did get his doctorate in geophysics, which is more applicable, but again, having one geophysicist in a research group is hardly enough to warrant overturning verified scientific facts established by thousands of geophysicists. Next, you bring up coal and diamond samples that are supposedly millions of years old, but they have C14 in them. Well, first off, they are said to be millions of years old for a reason, because they've been tested by other methods. C14 is not the only dating method, far from it. Correct scientific experiments utilize various dating methods and compare them in order to get rid of the errors associated with any one dating method. This itself is a big flaw with the RATE group's conclusions and your conclusion. C14 is known to give incorrect results when one applies them to materials that are known to be millions of years old. You can't apply C14 dating when it's not applicable. Contamination can occur in, well, a zillion ways. To say that C14 found in these samples is evidence to overthrow the idea of the old Earth is to ignore dating methods like uranium, lead, potassium, argon, rubidium, strontium, lead. The list goes on and on. These methods all agree on the current ages of the Earth. To say this is wrong because one method is incorrectly applied is just bad science. Now, the explanations offered by geophysicists, for instance, that coal samples had fungi that produced C14 or that the RATE group simply accidentally contaminated the samples during processing, are perfectly valid explanations. They make sense, and especially when we take the entirety of evidence into account. Cherry picking to make an argument is essentially what creationists are doing in this case. Look at it this way. If we had 12 independent groups count up and agree on the number of planets in space, and they did this all by different methods, and then one guy came up and said, well, there are actually only 6 planets instead of 8. It's suddenly up to the 12 groups to demonstrate there are actually 8? No. It's much more reasonable to conclude that the last group simply miscounted because the evidence for 8 planets is so overwhelming compared to one group saying there are 6 by a flawed method of counting. We have an explanation for the C14 results. The fact that samples can get contaminated with C14 has been known for ages, which is why we test the samples with other dating methods to establish an age. This argument is simply cherry picking to make a point.